Well, there are two fundamental questions that one has to address when you're talking about the level of property taxes. What should the level be? These are kind of simple questions. What should the level be? How much should we finance? It's driven by how much you want to spend, how much services you want, and who should pay for that? What should the distribution of the burden be? In trying to answer those questions, there are two principles that economists present. One is what is known as horizontal equity. That is that people who have the same ability to pay should pay the same tax. And the second is vertical equity, which is people who have more ability to pay should pay more. That begs a whole host of questions. What's the ability to pay? Is it income? Is it wealth, which is property value? How much more should wealthy people pay than poor people? How much should business pay versus individuals? How do we rank nationally? Well, as I said, we're about $900 per capita, which ranks us 29th. If we look just at tax on homeowners, median house pays about $1,100 in taxes, property taxes. That ranks 36th. As a percent of the median value of the home, it ranks 30th. And as a percent of median income, it ranks 37th. Okay? We're a little below 2% currently in terms of property tax on homes. Let me talk about, is the property tax a good tax? And so there's several things to look at. First of all, it's a stable tax. In terms of income, in terms of revenue, it's fairly stable because you can adjust the rate fairly quickly, and you can do that after the base is determined. Sales taxes, you set the rate, and you get whatever people decide to spend, so the base occurs after the sale has occurred. The base, however, does vary. You read the newspaper, you realize that property values are declining in lots of places. So there is some flexibility over the business cycle. The base is fairly stable in terms of its mobility. Properties get depreciated over time, they get torn down and built elsewhere. So there is some mobility, but in the short run, it's pretty stable geographically. In terms of equity, across the board, sort of by income group, as we saw, it's not as regressive as most people think it is. And economists have been looking at this for a long time, and generally the consensus is that it's not a highly regressive tax. It's not as regressive as the sales tax, for example. It provides a great deal of fiscal autonomy. It allows local governments the option of deciding how much they want to spend. Okay? When you take that away from local governments or any government, you're dependent upon another government, and you don't have the kind of ability to dictate your own spending and what you want to do. You think of the property tax as sort of a price you pay for living in a community for the services they provide. But it also provides fiscal restraint. If you obviously know what the property tax is going to be, and you got to know that if you want more services, you're going to pay a higher property tax, it constrains what you do. On the other hand, it's also very unpopular. Every poll you take says, we don't like the property tax. Now, if you're fiscal conservative, that's a good thing, because you don't want to tax. People want to pay, because that allows an easier time of raising the rates. I want to first talk about how much and how property taxes are used in Georgia. So this is for 2006. We had about $9.7 billion in property taxes we collected from individuals, businesses, and so forth, and from all types of governments. In perspective, the state budget, state general fund budget is about $20 billion. So this is more than the sales tax revenue, but a little bit less than the income tax revenue. The biggest share of that goes to schools. We calculate about 57% of the property taxes goes to schools. Okay? And you can see that counties get a big share, the biggest next share of it, and the state has a very minor role. It has a pretty minuscule amount of property tax. How has it changed over time? Beginning of this current decade, that growth has been due largely to increases in school financing to offset the decreases in state funding. If you look at spending per student in state plus local, it's tracked pretty consistently over the 90s and the end of this decade. But the splits changed. In the locals, their share has gone up some in order to offset the federal. Counties, the smallest, schools, the largest outside the state. And because the other jurisdictions, their revenues have been growing slower than the state, it suggests that they've been lowering their millage rate because the property tax base ought to be growing about the same. But you can see in schools there, the large number is because it's per student, not per capita. In terms of who pays, other than the lowest 20% of the population, property taxes here are relatively proportional. Okay? Another way of looking at this is what we did was to look at the property taxes that are reported by homeowners and compare that to the reported income. But you can see that in the first column, income of less than $30,000, almost everybody pays taxes of $0 to $1,000. Okay? But there are some people at that income level who pay more than $7,000. So these would be people who have very low income at the time, but a very large house. Okay? These are just homeowners. As you go up, you'll see that still most people are paying less than $3,000, although the percent paying that amount increases. But very few people, until you get to the over $200,000 income, are paying more than that. Okay? But there is a distribution. So within any income group, there is this inequity. So the rate that you pay is partly is a self-selection on the part of homeowners about where they're going to live and the services they're going to get.